So welcome to the Spirit Pathways podcast. I've got Fiorenza Scholey with me again, and we thought the topic of this podcast would be the theme of Christmas, seeing we are all about to enter into the Christmas spirit, or some of us are not.
Good morning. As you can see, I have my Christmas tree in the Christmas spirit. I thought I would sit in front of my Christmas tree so that we can enter into the Christmas spirit, because what you and I were talking about is the fact that it is an extremely, well, we all know it's an extremely stressful time. And I was questioning myself this morning about what is it? I mean, apart from the obvious, but what is it that makes it so incredibly stressful? Why is it that year after year, we allow ourselves to be dragged into a state of hysteria and pressure, and we fall into the traps of exactly panic and, you know, the build up to Christmas, and then the anticipation of being in complicated family situations and feeling and always getting caught unawares as to how to deal with it. Why is it that we always fall into the same traps? And how can we change the way we go into Christmas? How can we change that reality? So that was my thought this morning. And one of the things that came to me was, first of all, I mean, I see, first of all, this is for myself. Christmas is always a bit of a minefield for me for many reasons. And this year, as much as any, and the Christmas spirit was definitely not coming forth this year. And I found in fact, to the point where my children told me that I was the Grinch. So that definitely put me in my place. So I thought, okay, so I sort of pushed myself into the Christmas spirit. And I decided, okay, I actually stood back consciously and said, what can I do to inspire the feelings of joy that are not naturally coming forth? And so one of the things what I started to do is, when I wake up in the morning, I put on Classic FM, which is the British radio station, classical music radio station, which at the moment plays nothing but carols and Christmas music. And I have it on Alexa in any room I walk into. So I'm forced away from my thoughts, away from my black anti-Christmas thoughts, and into a space of, and I find myself singing hymns because that's in my DNA, and singing along, and I'm sort of forced into being happy and hearing the happiness that is being spread around the world. So, I think that there are things that we can actually do if we stop and we pause and we say, okay, what can I do to help myself this year go into it, approach it differently? How can we approach it differently?
Well, I think that's an interesting way of doing it, listening to Christmas carols. I must say, I don't think I've heard a Christmas carol except when I've gone into the shops.
Doesn't it make you feel happy when you go into the shop and you hear a Christmas carol?
No, because I'm generally looking at the hordes of people and thinking, oh, good God, get me through this.
Well, that's also an interesting, I think also the consumerism of Christmas has, I don't know how other people see it, but I think that, when we look at in our childhood, so, in my case, we're talking over 50 years ago, yours 40 years ago. And in our childhood, well, you were little, that it was the consumerism was less exaggerated. I think we've got to a point, especially since online buying, and the pressure of, having to buy and wanting to buy, and this mania with stuff, and we've lost the essence of things like Christmas. And that's where Thanksgiving, you see, in fact, I said to my family this year, we are going to live Christmas as if it was Thanksgiving. because Thanksgiving is an amazing holiday, because the whole country, 330 million Americans, just celebrate being grateful and being together. And really, that's what Christmas is about. I mean, perhaps, one of the questions, as we ask ourselves how we can go into Christmas in a more conscious way, is, what is Christmas to me? What would I like Christmas to be? How can this day bring out the best in me?
I think that's also an important question, because we also need to determine what Christmas means to us as individuals. And I know that, as children, there's the excitement of Santa Claus or Father Christmas arriving and the presents, and it becomes all about that. But the deeper meaning behind Christmas is often lost. And then as we get older, the pressure of stepping into those family dynamics that can be triggering and can be quite traumatic and difficult and challenging to face, that comes with all the pressure of, now I need to find this jolly attitude or this jolly feeling or this joy for being with family, and I think that the deeper meaning around Christmas is therefore lost. And I've been, over the last few years, when I was a child, Christmas was very definitely family orientated. My father's family's scattered was scattered around the world. They've now all seem to have located themselves in Canada. But my mother's family were all here, and it was a huge tradition for us to get together as a family. My grandparents would host the Christmas Eve dinner. All the aunts and uncles would come, all the cousins would come. There would be this massive table filled with family. And it was a lot of fun. I got to spend time with my cousins. The food was always delicious. We used to make ourselves sick eating my grandmother's homemade ice cream. So there was this feeling of excitement and joy of being with people who loved me. But then the adult dynamic wasn't really present for me, because I wasn't engaged in that. I wasn't involved in that. There was a separate table for the children, so we sat at that separate table. We weren't part of the underlying tension that was going on, because it did exist, which I found out much later, and in conversation with my aunts and my father, and discovering what was really happening at that table. And then as I got older, you start to see those dynamics emerge, and you start to see the underlying tension and the little jabs that come out, and the mean comments, and and then Christmas starts to lose its sparkle, or loses that joy, because all of a sudden it's not because these people are wanting to be together because they love each other. They're being forced to be together because they're family, and that's what family does. So there are all these expectations that then come from that, but that put this enormous pressure on us. And for me, it's since I got divorced, I suddenly realized yesterday, I think it's been nearly 18 years since I was divorced. So it's been nearly 18 years since I've had a real family Christmas. We had one a couple of years ago when a cousin was getting married here. So family all came down, and that was wonderful to be with people that I hadn't seen for a long time. But now it's become this really small and intimate space with just my children and their partners, and friends who haven't got anything else to do. And I tried to bring in that feeling and that sense of honoring this time of year, that it should actually be a space of reflection. We are heading towards the end of the year. And I think particularly now, with everything that's going on, we're in this massive process of rebirth. There's a lot of internal shifting, transformation, and change that's happening. We've been locked up and isolated and come in and out of the restrictions that have been placed on us over the last 2 years. And certainly here in South Africa, nothing seems to have changed, but I know that in the rest of the world, things are getting locked down again, and Christmas is becoming even more challenging.
Yeah.
And, I woke up this morning thinking, this really needs to be a time for me personally to be able to reflect on the year that has been, what I have achieved, what has been challenging, what have I overcome, and to look at, I think, the connection that I've made with myself, and therefore the deepening connections that I've made with other people. And those other people who have become family, may not be blood relation, but have become family through friendships and a deepening of that connection. And I think there's a feeling of reverence that I'm starting to feel around this time of year, which is new. So,
which is beautiful because that is what it should be. It should be, it should be a time of reflection. It is a time of rebirth. It was born of being a time of birth. So, that is where the nature of Christmas is the beginning of something. It's the celebration of a new beginning. And I think, with as far as the family tensions are concerned, we get so, and this is where, I go back to, how can we put a conscious space? How can we enter into this time of year, putting a space for a moment between us and as we walk into it and say, okay, how am I going to do this differently? Because one of the things that helped me was this lesson I learned about, which I've mentioned before, is evidence of presence. And that gets me through moments of, gatherings of family tension and family difficulties. And because that reminder that this is a day, there aren't many days in which we all come together, and it is an obligation. It's sort of, obligatory, compulsory fun. But as long as we're going to be together, let's make the most of it. How can I, because it's all about attitude. At the end of the day, it's only, every single relationship, every single situation in our lives is about the way in which we engage in it. It's our attitude to it. And black can turn to white depending on which way we come from it. So if you walk into a situation like that and say, okay, I've got, Great Aunt Maud and Uncle Jimmy and, and the cousins who drive me nuts, but one day they won't be there. One day they will no longer be. And I will never have this moment. I won't have this moment. And so if for that day, one can just remember, however annoying, however, whatever they throw your way, you just look at them and say, evidence of presence. I have to take this moment and be grateful for the fact that they're here in whatever form it is, and not take it personally. I mean, we go back to all our tools that we have. Exactly. Not take it personally, know that it's about them, not about us. And also, when it gets, because it's hard, especially when you do have little kids. I mean, I think, when you have a lot going on, and when you have the kids, you have the joy of creating that for them.
Yeah, the magic, yeah,
exactly, and through their wonder. And I think there is that shift when we move out of that time of being able to create it, being children, having children, or having children around. And if you don't have children around, Christmas can become a little bit more forced, because you're sort of trying desperately to make it into this fantastic, joyful thing, when that's the last thing, the turkey's burning, you don't want to do it anyway. And but that we can, when it gets tense, what can we do in order to avoid conflict? What can we do in order to avoid arguments? And everybody has their own toolkit of what to do. Personally, there's a friend of mine she always uses the phrase, leave the room. And that can be leave the room momentarily, physically, just, oh, I just have to go and do something. Not I'm storming out. Please note that I am storming out. You have seriously ticked me off. No, you just leave the room, take your energy to a different room, or just leave the room mentally. Just take yourself to a different space, shut down, and come back when when you're able to engage. And that is our choice, because it is always our choice to enter into conflict. And this is what we forget. We get triggered. We get, our emotions get ignited, but it's our choice as to how we react to them. Because at the end of the day, they're emotions, they're thoughts and emotions. Feelings come from thoughts. And so, and thoughts come from feelings, actually it's both ways. So I think we do have a choice as to how and it's not, if we walk into it consciously, almost as if you had a to-do list, I am going to do Christmas like this year, and you can consult your list of how do I deal with tricky situations.
And I think also invariably there is an awareness of what we're stepping into. We know these people. These are, generally it's family. We know the triggers. We know the things that are going to.
We know what's coming. We know what's coming.
So, we can actually prepare ourselves by being ready for what we're going to be stepping into. And I think it's, this is where mindfulness is so important, because yes, those feelings are going to come up, those emotions are going to come up, but this is where we get to choose what to do with it, because those feelings can then take us into those negative thoughts, and therefore into confrontation. Or in our head, we can say to ourselves, this is not about the present. In this moment, everything is fine. If I take away the past, whatever this person is doing means nothing. It has no space to land.
Right.
But if I keep bringing the past into this situation, I'm going to be triggered by this what is said. I'm going to be triggered by people's behavior. And so if we can be present to the moment of what that I'm here right now, in this moment, the past no longer exists. If I can leave that behind at the door and step into the space and just be here, I can actually glide through it without feeling triggered, without those emotions being, the buttons being pushed and the emotions then being heightened. And, for me, I think one of the easiest ways that I navigate through those kind of challenging situations is through humor. So, either in my head, I'm making myself laugh by thinking something, or I will crack a joke, or I will change the topic of conversation, or, kick one of my children under the table so they know. Change the conversation, do something, step in here, call me out of. And that's also for me is important. My children thankfully are old enough for me to have had conversations with them about family dynamics, and we have certain looks that we give each other that are, help get me out of here. And one or the other of us will step forward and say, can I just talk to you for a second, and take us away, physically take us away from that situation, which is also quite helpful, because it means that we don't feel necessarily alone and trapped in that space, because we're not. There are other people with us that feel the same way.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you have the complicity. I mean, if you can have even the complicity of one person, then you don't feel trapped, and you don't get into the helter skelter downward spiral of and as you say, it's presence. It is about being present. So we can use a double entendre of the present of presence. We can give ourselves the present of presence for this Christmas. I was thinking about also how I've had to reframe Christmas, because 4 years ago I stopped drinking, and Christmas until 4 years ago was, you know, in a haze of bubbles, which made it so much easier. and also, you know, which gave me this Christmas spirit, whether I felt it or not. And, you know, taking that away, removing that from my life was very challenging. It took, you know, all these, because I no longer had the tool that I had always used to deal with difficult dynamics, that numbing tool of, you know, let's just flatten it out and we'll get through it. I also didn't have the tool of making myself incredibly jolly when I wasn't necessarily feeling very jolly. The tool of making myself extremely funny when I wasn't feeling very funny. And, you know, and that required me to reframe Christmas, because I had to go into it with all those feelings alive, and, you know, and all those nerve ends, without, yeah, exactly. And never having had to do it, never, you know, going into literally the first time in my life, in my 50s, having to live one of these situations without being in a pleasantly or unpleasantly numbed state. And you know, I think for that's always challenging for people who are sober. And, you know, in fact, the 12-step programs are filled at this time of year of people who, you know, because it is our go-to. And even though, and I, you know, even though, I mean, I haven't been sober that long, but there are moments where I think, you know, I'll never want to have another drink again, and it would never cross my mind. And then, you know, 2 days ago, as I was going ballistic with my Christmas tree, it was like, you know, I really, right now might be the moment where I crack a bottle of wine. This is going to be the moment. I can do it just once. And I start having all these thoughts of, I could do it just once. It's okay. It's just not a risk. Tomorrow it'll be, and all those. And I took a moment and I sat back and I thought, wow, you know, thank God there are these reminders that this will always be there. This will always be a situation. I will never, ever be, I don't want to say cured, but I will never be free of the impulse to go to that place of numbing, you know, never. And even if it's just, well, it would, no. And in that moment, it was a place of numbing. It came from feelings. It came from sort of being completely overwhelmed and just wanting to put it away. And, you know, anything else seemed like too hard work, you know, going. And I ended up just taking the phrase that we're taught, which is move a muscle, change a thought. So I thought, okay. And I just took myself out into the freezing cold outside, gave myself a good few breaths of fresh air, came back in, and it had gone. But, you know, this toolkit, you know, we've acquired this toolkit, and these are reminders that we will always need these toolkits. We will always need the tools in those toolkits. And the reframing of Christmas is not unlike what we're talking about. You know, it doesn't have to be because you're sober and you have to find a new way to go into Christmas. It can just be because you have complicated family dynamics. But if you choose to go back into that dynamic, because we also have the choice to say, you know what, I'm not doing Christmas. I'm not going to be with you. I'm not coming. You know, this sense of obligation we have to fulfill commitments that we made, promises that we made a long time ago, that maybe today are not relevant. You know, I think that's also part of it. You know, when we get into a situation of obligation, why are we there? Let's question, how is this still relevant today? Is this something I have to do? You know, might it upset people if I don't? Yes. But is that what's more important? How really damaging would that be? And I think these are questions that, even though that they're scary for some people, you know, the idea of, oh my God, I couldn't possibly not go for Christmas. I mean, I remember the first time I didn't go for Christmas with my family, and I went to Israel, because, as you know, my husband is Israeli. And I went to Israel, which is a very good way of avoiding Christmas completely, because they don't do Christmas. Highly recommended if you're looking for a way out. And it took me several years to get to the point where I had the courage to say to my family, no, we're not going to be there for Christmas, because I had this vision that the world would end if I brought this day that was so sacrosanct to an end as the family format. And you know what? It happened. They found a different way to celebrate Christmas. And it gave us a chance to, it gave me, I now always have a door. Always have a door, because there's always, I know that the world will not end if I change the dynamic of our Christmas. And I think we also get into, we get into that in relationships too, of, I can't change it. I can't say that. If I say it, the whole world will end if I hurt her feelings. No, it won't. It might be uncomfortable, but you'll walk through that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a new way of doing things. And that's the same with these days that we have put in place. They are supposed to be a source of pleasure. The day that they're not a source of pleasure, we have to look at them and see, what can we change in ourselves to create the pleasure? Because at the end of the day, that's all it is. If every single person going into these situations actually said, today I'm going to create a situation of pleasure, every Christmas table would be filled with joy and light. So we can only do our part. And if we know that we can't do that, then maybe we have to question why we're there.
Well, I think, I think the questioning is really important, because, as you said, there are so many traditions that we buy into, not because they are something that we want to do, but something that we feel that we have to do. And for me, it's been, I no longer have anything to do with my own mother, as a result of years and years and years and years of abuse. And eventually it got to the point where I had to draw the line, and I had to put that boundary in place and say, well, I'm not going to put myself in this position anymore. I'm not going to put myself in this space anymore, because it does nothing for me but hurt me. And actually, I am hurting myself by expecting it to be different every time I step into that space. And I drew that line, and it's taken a good few years for the rest of my family to get it through their own heads that I'm not going to be there for Christmas, because I'm not buying into that false sense of family, that false sense of tradition, that false sense of even community, because it's not real. And every time I placed myself in that situation, I would walk away having been wounded again and again and again. And it was just like, why am I doing this to myself? What am I getting out of this? Is there some martyr aspect of me that thinks I need to martyr myself every time Christmas comes, or every time there's some family holiday that I feel like I need to be a part of? And I had to sit and ask myself some really difficult questions. And, like you, I haven't drunk alcohol for 16 years, I think it is. So, those Christmas and family traditions and family holidays got more and more and more challenging to be a part of, because I didn't have the alcohol to numb the feelings or the emotions, or to create that feeling of disconnection, which is actually what I wanted. I needed to be disconnected from what was happening, because it was just too much and too overwhelming and too painful. And it does require a level of self-reflection around, I think, things like self-care, boundaries. In my family, boundaries, they don't exist. They just don't exist. And so for someone like me who's spent close on 30 years now working on myself and trying to figure out, how do boundaries even work? What do they look like? How do you establish them? How do you set them up? How do you then enforce them when you determine what those boundaries are that you need? It's been an incredibly difficult but also empowering space to move into, to actually go, this is actually about self-love, self-care, and what I need, which is something that took me nearly 40 years to work out, that I count, that my feelings are important, that my feelings are validated, and I had to validate those feelings because they certainly weren't being validated by anyone externally. And to realize that actually doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It matters what I think. It matters what I think about myself. And every time I put myself into those challenging situations, I walked away feeling bad about myself. And I had to look at why, because it's not them, it's me. I keep putting myself there.
Yeah.
And it's an important process. And I think that one of the benefits of this time of the pandemic and everything that we've been in, and lockdown and isolation and all of that, is that actually a lot of people have had the good excuse of being able to say, well, I'm in isolation, I can't come, or I can't do this because I've been exposed, or we've had that excuse to be able to use. But I think it's also given us an opportunity to look at how things can be done differently.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't actually have to keep doing the same things that we've been doing all our lives. We can actually now do them differently. And I've noticed a lot of people doing things differently as a result of the last 2 years and what we've gone through. They are now going, well, actually, this doesn't work for me. And the world doesn't fall apart, and the world does not end when I go, I'm not going to be there.
Well, because they've been given the opportunity, because with these 2 years of, all these points of reference that we have in place, which have been which have disintegrated over the last couple of years, they've been given a chance to live those situations differently, without thinking about it. They've gone into it without choosing it. And as a result, they've been able to look at it and say, wow, that felt different, and so they've been given a space, and they've been given a door. That door was given to them. They didn't even have to find it. The door was given to them. And so now they have, and you're right. I mean, I too have noticed that people are making different choices, and they're reflecting. I mean, this is also, as hard as it has been, it has caused many to reflect. And those who choose not to reflect actually possibly have the hardest time, because if we've taken this space and said, okay, I'm going to use it, I've been given this, I mean, one of the things, once again, we go into Christmas, everything starts to shut down. My daughter was supposed to go to a party last night, last minute, it's not happening, COVID shut it down, et cetera, et cetera. Now, 2 years ago, that was, oh no, terrible. And everyone was, very dramatic. And now it's just like, okay, fine. And I mean, I even watched her, 16 years old. She said, well, it's fine. It's because of COVID. And so she just put on a film and made a hot chocolate. And that flexibility, especially in a kid, you see it, that is amazing. And so for us too, we accept, all of a sudden we accept things, and we have the ability to, or we're starting to have the ability to be flexible and open, and this word that is the theme at the moment, which is surrender, and just to surrender to situations, because we have no idea what is going to happen in 5 minutes time. And it's actually, a metaphor for really everything. It is for life. If we can take this lesson, and this is my hope and my belief, is that this is happening on such a grand scale and going on for so long. I mean, I have this number, for me, 2024, when we went into this, it was like, I had this, 2024, we're not even going to start coming out of this before 2024. And because it's going to take that amount of time for people to actually really make the change, because you do this 1 year, 2 years, you can then come out. It's a little bit like, after 9/11 in New York. I was living in New York during 9/11. After 9/11, for 1 year, all New Yorkers were absolutely wonderful to each other. It was a whole different New Yorker. Everybody was nice and open and kind, and it was just to the day 9/11. After 1 year, everybody went back to the way they were before. It was this hustle and bustle and not paying attention and just blinkered. And, because we forget. And so this pandemic is giving us an opportunity not to forget, because, it takes, don't they say it's 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. It's the three that it takes. It's going to take us. It takes 3 years to change that habit, to shift all those ways in which we lived in the old world and move into the new world. And we need to ensure that we will not go back to the way things are. We have a tremendous opportunity here. Tremendous. And maybe that's what we can think about as we go into this Christmas. I know that, having had this conversation, I will be thinking about this as I go into Christmas. I'm going to see my family today, of okay, this is my chance to do it differently, to do it consciously and differently, and as a result to enjoy even the tensions, to enjoy it, because those tensions are evidence of presence. Those tensions are a chance for me to use my tools, to use these tools that I have spent a lifetime collecting. I've earned this toolbox. I've earned it. We've all, the bigger our toolbox is, the more challenges we go through and the more lessons we learn from it, the bigger our toolbox becomes. And that's our badge of honor. And so we can just go in there and take it. Okay, I need this tool for this thing. And to actually look upon it as, oh, look, I used that tool, pat on back, and off you go. And it changes everything. Everything.
Yeah, it does.
Without the bottle of bubbly. Although I am so happy that there are so many people out there who will be enjoying the bubbly on my behalf.
Yes, me too. And I have to agree with you that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, just give me a drink so I can get through this.
Exactly.
It doesn't go away. There are still times where I just think, oh, it'd be so much easier with a glass of something in my hand.
Absolutely. But you know what? Even that is a reminder of that tool.
But it's also, the weird thing is that I still think it would be easier if I had that glass of something in my hand. And yet I know that actually it wouldn't be easier, because I'd wake up tomorrow and all those old thoughts, a friend and I used to call it the black dog. The black dog arrives and you just feel so shit about yourself.
Absolutely.
It's just not worth it, so I have, as I have that thought of this would be easier with something, I remember what it feels like the next day.
That's the tool. And that's the tool. The tool is knowing, is remembering, because you could choose not to remember what it's going to be like tomorrow for you.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, I did choose it many, many, many times to
to not remember.
Ignore what I would be dealing with next day.
Exactly.
Well,
I think we've come to our.
We have come to the end of this, and for all those who are listening, enjoy your Christmas, whatever you may be doing, wherever you may be, and may the Christmas spirit of joy and magic appear within you and in your life and in your family.
Exactly. And happy Christmas to everybody, and happy holidays to those who don't celebrate Christmas, because anyway, the beauty is that Christmas is a spirit. I mean, my Jewish husband is one of the greatest lovers of Christmas, because he really lives it for the essence of what it is, because he doesn't have the baggage. You see, that's also the interesting lesson. He doesn't have the baggage of the obligation of Christmas. So for him, every Christmas is a choice. It's a choice, and it's a celebration just of being together and of the joy of the colors and the tree and the flowers and the panettone and the whatever it is that anybody's eating at Christmas.
Well, so let's take a leaf out of his book.
Exactly. Let's enter into it with the spirit that we have chosen it. We have
Yeah.
chosen it. And I
And
wish
not
you the
our
best
obligation.
Christmas ever.
And to you too. And I look forward to seeing what we're going to do in 2022, which is just
Absolutely.
around the corner.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Fiorenza.